Yom Kippur. Technically it's Yom Kippur. Well, a little bit after. Because, it's like 2 in the morning. I hope we can be long that goes we by the fire. This is my actual little blanket I brought to help myself feel a little better. But, are you doing anything for Yom Kippur? Well, by doing anything, I mean, I guess, are you observing the fast? It's good to see you. I'm gonna right into reading if that's okay with you. But I hope you're doing okay. If you don't know, Yom Kippur is the day of Atonement. It's the holiest day in the Jewish calendar and in the year. And generally, we take it to, well, I'll read and you can see kind of where it comes from. So this is going to be Parshat Achari. I'm going to read 1 to 34. This is my Chumash. It is the Chumash. I don't know how to pronounce it. The Lubavitcher Rabbi. And this is from Vayikra, which my rabbi always says is the Torah Parsha, well not Parsha, but the Torah section or book that is most commonly quoted by the Mashiach. So, let me know if the sound needs to be different. I am a little bit concerned that maybe it's not full enough, or somehow there's other sound problems that I'm not tracking. So you let me know. This is what's up. God said to Moshe, after the death of Aaron's 2 sons, when they came near before God and they died, God said to Moshe, speak to your brother Aaron, that he should not come at all times into the Holy of Holies, inside the partition, in front of the lid which is on the ark, so that he should not die. And these things in the parentheses, sometimes I will skip, because they're not actually in the actual Hebrew. They are translations that somebody added to kind of strengthen their theology, which I appreciate the intent, but often it is debatable, right? Because it's not what's exactly in there, so I'll skip these. Appears with cloud. And I have a note here from last year. You cannot soar without 2 feet on the ground. The heavens belong to God, and the earth he gave to men. We worship in the physical world. I have this because there's a rabbinic note here in the last word that says, how can one expect a person with a glimpse of spiritual bliss to want to return back down to the earth in his mundane life? They have another note about or chayim, or light of life somewhere. back at the height of his arousal, reimmerse himself into the constraints of corporeal existence. From where can a person acquire the vigilance not to go too far? Is this some kind of base analysis? There's other analysis from Rashi and other folks. It tends to be very metaphysical. It depends on how the person starts his spiritual voyage. If he starts with the goal of self-satisfaction, he will not want to turn back from his spiritual bliss to attend to the needs of his physical world. But if his initial intention is to follow God's will, then even at a point of heightened spiritual arousal, he will still be willing to return back to the world and carry out the mission for which he was created. For God created the world not to be empty. He formed it to be inhabited. And that's from Isaiah 45:18. On a smaller scale, every Jew sometimes has a spiritual awakening, perhaps on Shabbos or the festivals, or more particularly during the 10 days of remembrance and Yom Kippur. At such a time, he should remember that whatever he experiences during this special holy moment needs to be taken back with him when he returns to the normal, everyday life. This spiritual awakening must not be allowed to evaporate without having a tangible effect. It must be harnessed as a moment of true, lasting inspiration based on It's interesting that this is commentary on this part, and it's because they're going to start talking about the high priest, or the Kohen Gadol, coming out of the inner, essentially holy of holies. Yeah, I agree with you. My rabbi loves this so much because it has a lot of true things in it. But there are also a lot of things that are, just with any commentary, there's sometimes things that are not true. And one thing that I don't love, that my rabbi also doesn't love, is the fact that they insert their interpretation into the passage. I really prefer when you put your interpretation in the footnotes only, so that I just think that's more honest. So, anyway, in the previous parsha, Aaron's sons were many died or experienced revolt when they went into the Holy of Holies and offered strange fire, is what it was called. In other words, there's an element of presumption and separation, essentially, between us and the divine. Why would this be, you might ask? And it seems very strange, and I think it seems very strange to a lot of modern people, that pretty much all older faiths, if you trace it way back, there's some element of sacrifice, and this understanding that we've taken life and energy from the world that has harmed it, and that needs to be given back. And in some belief systems, they try to deal with this with something like human sacrifice, because they see it as like a financial exchange, right? Like the Aztecs, we kill such and such people, and the gods will feed on them, and we will then, the sun will continue burning, right? The thing that's so unique about Yom Kippur we feed on him, and he doesn't need us, right? There have been historical attempts to say that things like transubstantiation and other elements originally came from like pagan Isis cults, but actually there is no evidence predating the Judeo-Christian idea of the Elohim who provides a sacrifice for us, like with Isaac, when instead of Isaac, a ram is provided. So you have the same concept here, where there is this separation, there is something wrong with our world, and there is blood that is flowed. And you can kind of think about it as like a physical law of energy exchange. I have found that since thinking about it, in some ways sci-fi has helped me, science has certainly helped me to understand, like, we have created essentially a energy drain, right? And what can put that back? Well, really, even in like Yeshaya and Jeremiah and other places, it says it's not the blood of goats and rams. They are the innocent and beautiful representation of Elohim himself, right? Who provides it. That is some of the metaphysical, theological background for Yom Kippur, which I'm sure must be very strange, but we're just going to keep reading the rest of the parsha. So, the service of Yom Kippur. No one should enter the Holy of Holies only on Yom Kippur, when he should bring a young bull for a sin offering and a ram for burnt offering. I have notes here from last year. Elevating the offering, elevate himself. And it's like you said, we go into the Holy of Holies and we come back out. Like you said, it's like mission trip people who have the spiritual high and then no practical change or teshuvah in their lives after they come back. So I think you made a really good comparison there. He should wear a linen tunic, so it represents cleansing. Linen pants shall be on his body, and that's underwear, and so that represents humility, right? He should guard himself with a linen sash. I'm not sure why my rabbi said that represented truth. It's interesting. Sometimes it's because my Hebrew is a little weak. I've been learning it for about 10 years, and it's still weak. My vocabulary is okay, but my actual reading letters is these are holy garments, so he shall immerse himself in water before he puts them on. So, and the linen turban, it's important, right? So we mentioned things that are clean, and we mentioned the most humble part of the body, right? The part that's covered by underwear, and the most elevated part of the body, the part that's covered by a turban. All of it needs to be under Elohim and protected by purity. He should take from the community of the children of Israel 2 male goats as a sin offering, and 1 ram as a burnt offering. One should bring his own sin offering bull and atone for himself and his household. In other words, he can't serve until he has served others, or until he has been served. Right? He should take the 2 male goats and place them before God at the entrance to the tent of meeting. Aaron should place lots upon the 2 male goats, 1 lot if these ancient scriptures have the truth, it would make sense that they would be hotly contested and that there were things that would be hidden. And so I highly encourage taking the time to study for yourself. And that doesn't mean you have to become. So, among the indigenous people that I work with in Paraguay, among the Guarani people, there's not a lot of literacy. There's a very low chance that any of them are ever going to be able to read Torah in Hebrew, but they are able to receive encouragement within their context with the Literature and the Torah and Tanakh in their language, right? As one of the pastors I work with down there who provides food to the needy in the indigenous community every week, as he says, he tries to focus on the simple good news, right? So there's that balance, but at the same time, the more privileged you are, the more you owe. And there's so much beauty in the Torah that is missed by not really studying. So I would encourage you, whenever a passage is confusing, you can go to blueletterbible.org. They have the Strong's Concordance uploaded there, which is basically a Hebrew dictionary, and you can actually scroll through the Masoretic text from the earliest codexes, like the Leningrad Codex. So you can check word for word what is being said, and that's very helpful for those of us who are trying to study and deepen, but maybe don't have that, high level knowledge quite yet. I hope that makes sense. I'll keep reading. So Azazel has two meanings. It can mean a goat god. Some people are often confused by this, and there are people who see it. They're historians who see this as like offering to two different gods, but it's essentially to make up for, right, the goat god. So the other word, so it's essentially rejected by men, right? Which is interesting because it's what Yeshaya says about the Mashiach. I highly encourage reading Yeshaya 53, which I think we'll read today. So, one goat is represented by essentially being consumed by holiness, and the other one is rejected and sent away. And both of them represent the Mashiach, right? And there have been many, many sects of Judaism that have thought at different points in time that different people were the Mashiach. The commonly accepted belief in the majority of Orthodox, Reform, and Conservative Judaism is that the Mashiach has not yet come. But one of the oldest branches of Judaism, the Nunnery Judaism, actually from which Gentile Christianity evolved, right, but was Judaism, held, as you may know, that Yeshua and Joseph was the Mashiach. Those people didn't stop being Jewish when they decided he was their Jewish Mashiach, right? So it's strange that one of the main reasons that people become angry about that topic is because of the history of hurt between essentially Roman Christianity, right, and Jewish very good Catholics and many very good people from a lot of different belief systems. But the hurt is real, and that can cloud sometimes the discussion. But I think it's important to focus on these texts, what they actually say, the historical reality, and what the Tanakh says about who the Mashiach is supposed to be. We focus on that, and don't let the wrongs of history cloud our analysis, and don't lose or strip the culture away from, the Jewish man who was born in Palestine like 2,000 years ago, right? Yes, Elohim is for all people, but there is a reason that people are grafted into Israel, and the Ger Teshah is supposed to align with the Tanakh and the Torah. As it says repeatedly in Scripture, not because there's anything special that Israel or the Jewish people did, but because this was God chose as a vehicle to show. And what here, right? Other people also, we all have a piece of reflecting Him, but He chose this people group through whom to preserve and present His Messiah. So I think we should be careful about trying to eliminate that side of it. Right? And I agree with you. It is less what people call themselves and more what they believe. And that's why these conversations have to be so open. But I am talking far too much. We haven't even finished reading the first section. So, one shall bring the male goat upon which the lot before God came up and designated it as a sin offering. The male goat upon which the lot for casting on like came should be placed before God while it is still alive to Atone, sent away to a high cliff in the desert. One shall bring his own sin offering bowl, and he shall atone for himself and for his household. Then he shall slaughter his sin offering bowl. Very strange to modern sensibilities, right? He shall take a pan full of burning coals from upon the altar, from facing God's entrance into the land full of fine ground incense, and bring it inside the partition. He shall place the incense on the fire before God, so that a cloud of the incense covers the ark's lid that is above the testament, so that he will not die. There is a story. I don't know if it's actually I'm pretty sure it's not in Scripture, but there is a belief that, well, not a belief, like it's a historical reality, that they used to tie a bell around his ankle so that if it stopped ringing and they realized he was dead, they could, go get him. There was a rope, so they wouldn't go in to get him, they would pull him out, basically. Which is very interesting, I think, right? I mean, that's different. So, I actually want to read this to you with some of the Hebrew intact, so I can thumb through this, but read the Hebrew I'm such a distracted to admit, Bamidbar is always around the part of the year where I'm not reading scripture as much as I should for some reason. And so, for whatever reason, I know Bamidbar worse than I know any of the other books of the Torah. I think this year I missed like most of it. But I'm trying to work on an improved reading cycle so that that doesn't happen to me. Where are we? We are in chapter 16, right? Yeah. So I can read it to you with some of the Hebrew intact. Where are we? We are verse. Oh, we're almost finished with this page. Oh no, we're at the top. We're at verse 30. Okay. Yeah, that's how we're gonna read. Yeah, exactly. They would drag him out. So that's a historical reality, but it's not in the scripture. It's like a clever way that they dealt with the situation. Alright, so we are in verse 13, right? Okay. Right in verse 13. Oh, and he shall put the kettle upon the ash before Hashem, that the Atone of the kettle may cover the couplet that is upon the etude, that he die not. And he shall take the tongue of the bowl and sprinkle it with his forefinger upon the eastern front of the couplet. And before the couplet, Yaseh, he shall sprinkle. The translator of the OJV, which is what I'm reading from right now to get the sprinkling in Hebrew, recommends looking at Yeshaya 52:15 for Moshiach's worldwide sprinkle of the tongue with his forefinger 7 times. Verse 15. Then shall he slaughter the goat of the Hatat, which is by the and bring his tongue within the Balchet, and do it the tongue as he did the tongue of the bull, and sprinkle it upon the couplet and before the couplet. And he shall make a Kappolah for HaKodesh, because of the Tumah of the Bnei Yisrael, and because of their Peshaim and all their Chatat, and so shall he do to the Od and Moed that remaineth among them in the midst of the tail. Verse 17. There shall be no Adam. Adam is the word for man. Like mankind. So it covers everyone, which is different than the word Ish, which specifies male gender generally, versus Isha, which specifies female gender. So Adam. There shall be no Adam in the Old Moed when he goeth in to make up in English. We could actually find the word also here, if I can pull up. Let me see. Sometimes this computer is sometimes I don't know how to make it do what I want it to do. I guess I will open this. I don't know how to open. Oh, I have an idea. Copy this and here. Legion. If you want to know what I'm doing, I'm trying to pull up the single So, in Scripture, which I'll show you below, Hebrew letters or Hebrew numbers are denoted by letters, right? So, Aleph or A is 1 and so forth, right? Our English word alphabet. Our English word alphabet actually comes from Aleph, Beit, right? Or the list of letters, right? And sometimes it's a little difficult for me to remember all the letters and so forth. Okay, but I wanted to show you. We're going to try to find, or you're just going to practice finding the word Adam in the Hebrew, because that should be fairly easy. We're going to go ahead and look for the letter 17, or the number letter, same thing in Hebrew. So we're going to look for 8 and a 7, which we should be able to find here. So we're going to look good here. This is, is it? Let's double check. Nope, that's not it. We are looking for, okay, so that's going to be verse 16. So that's verse 16, which means verse 17 is this verse, right? You see with my fingers, that's going to be 17. I have a chart down. So verse 17, and we're going to look for the word Atone. Right here, it's right here. So this is I think it's Vikol Adam. Lo. That's right, it is. Because this is lo. No. So Vikol, all mankind. Vikol Adam. Lo. And that's the holy name. So basically, all mankind cannot God. Basically cannot be God. And then it goes on, right? So you see how in the Hebrew it's like a lot shorter than either of the translations tend to give us. So, like, it's a little, yeah, it's pretty different. So there's a lot of words that people add to better kind of explain what things mean, because Hebrew thinking is different. I think this is tent, somebody does, or tent, like the tabernacle. Mikan? No, that's not Mikan. To find because Mishkan should be the word we're looking for. So this is kind of how I have to pick what is the actual letters. Cool. More difficult for me in Hebrew script. Yeah, Hebrew goes the other way, right to left. So my pages also, we go this way. So yeah, we go from here onward. That's definitely the holy name, which is interesting because in neither this Chumash translation or the translation in my OJB, in neither of them does it speak in that order, but basically in the presence, right? That's interesting. This is what's difficult too, because the B looks super similar to the Kal. So sometimes that makes it hard. For me, this is wonder if this is Bahal. Other thing about Hebrew is, so you have the consonants. The original text only has the consonants. The vowels are added later by scribes who were then trying to, as the written language was developing, help people better understand what words were and avoid confusion. So the vowels are these tiny little dots around the letters. So the consonants are these, for the most part, these big letters. Unless, like in the case of Aleph, this is A basically. Or sometimes this letter is used, this first letter, which I pronounced with a V, is often used to express that there's a vowel space there. And then the ayin also. So it's confusing because the ayin, this letter, the ayin, the aleph, and this letter are often used kind of like vowels. But they're, and that's how we would voice them. But they are like they're in the consonant canon basically. So that's a little bit about how the Hebrew works. In the ESV, this is Leviticus or Vayikra. So, and by the way, I think the ESV is a really cool translation because they try to be very careful about not inserting their own opinion. And you'll see these really great footnotes where when they're unsure of the Hebrew words, they will put it, they will put it in the footnotes, which is great. Another translation that people in my Torah study group often really like is this one, the Koran Jerusalem translation. This is the Tanakh. Tanakh is an acronym for Torah, Nevi'im, Ketubah, wisdom writings. Yeah, that's it, right? So the Torah is the first 5 books of the special precepts and laws that were given to us by Elohim, by Hashem, so that we can live and be happy and experience goodness and happiness in this life, right? That's the Torah. Then there's the writings of the prophets that kind of detail what happened to Israel and what is going to happen and how God took care of his people. And then the wisdom writings. And I think I'm forgetting one section, but these texts were originally scrolls that were regarded as a library, which is the word that comes from the Latin for Bible, or in Spanish, like biblioteca, like library. That's where these were not in a codex. This is a codex. A book like this is a codex. They were scrolls. The first 5 books were together in one scroll, and some of the other works were in a scroll together. So, for example, Judges and Ruth were actually originally one scroll, and so forth. The 12 minor prophets, they're called minor only because they're shorter. They were one scroll, right? So, Gentiles often mistake that for meaning that the Bible was like invented later on, like during the you always hear people talk about like the Council of Nicaea, and they're like, oh, it's when some people randomly got together and decided what was going to be the Bible and what wasn't. But if you study Jewish history, nothing will be further from the truth. And this is why people who believe it, people who want to talk about whether you're an atheist or a Christian or a Buddhist or whatever, if you want to talk about the realities of God and the universe, it's really important to understand Jewish history, because otherwise there's a lot of misconceptions based on people only knowing some of the later history of specifically Christianity and not these ancient writings that came way before, right? So, like, after, for political reasons, right, after Martin Luther, the Catholic monk, was, sentenced to bad things because he claimed that the church didn't have the right to decide what was truth, but Scripture only had that right? After that, historically, in reaction, and by the way, he's another example of somebody who was anti-Semitic, did bad things, but also did really good things, like rescue women from forced nunneries, right? He helped smuggle women out of nunneries where they were trapped and not allowed to leave. They had to smuggle in wood barrels. That's actually how he met his wife, right? Some people are good and bad, but the Catholic, so the Jewish canon never, for example, included Maccabees. Maccabees is considered a historical document that adds interesting and important information about, for example, the founding of Hanukkah, right? But it wasn't seen as, like, divine. But after the whole, like, Luther-Catholic conflict, the Catholic Church actually decided to prove that they were allowed to add whatever they wanted. They added Maccabees and a number of other older Jewish scriptures to the canon and said these are part of the Bible now, right? So those kind of things happened, right? But the Tanakh that was affirmed at the Council of Nicaea, or the quote-unquote Old Testament, which is not a very nice way to say it, right, was what had been guarded by Jewish scribes for like 4,000 years, right? So all that people did was affirm, because now we're having a social shift, right? Council of Nicaea is around the time when Constantine is starting to kick Jewish people out of this faith that they founded, right? That's around the time when you're having a lot of debate with Gnosticism and with a lot of very complex, more goyim thought. In fact, there was a big stream of anti-Semitism in Gnosticism that said that the God of the Tanakh, or of the Old Testament, quote-unquote, that he was like evil, and the quote-unquote New Testament God, or Jesus, like, had to sacrifice to overcome him, right? That's a Gnostic thought. That's actually a very anti-Semitic belief that was basically being debated by people at the time, because remember, at the time there weren't these strict delineations between denominations and belief systems. Nitzari Jewish faith and Pharisaical faith and other rabbinic traditions were interchanging information, and we know this because the stuff we have from the Dead Sea Scrolls demonstrates many different sects keeping many different translations. There was debate, right? And so that same debate was carried over when non-Jewish people became incorporated into the Netzari Jewish belief system. But what happened as Jewish people became the minority? The last officially Jewish bishop of what would become the Catholic Church was Polycarp, who was a disciple of Yochanan, or John, right? And he held Jewish principles, right? So, as things changed historically, the Council of Nicaea essentially decided to affirm the Jewish books that had always been accepted, right? It wasn't like, oh, we're going to invent a Bible. It was, we affirm that we support the Jewish tradition, and we support what we believe we have the most evidence of being the apostolic writings, right? What they believed were the actual letters of people who had been with Yeshua and Rav Shaul and these other important quote-unquote New Testament figures. So that's why the delineation sometimes between quote-unquote Judeo-Christian thought is very intermingled, right? And you're right, there's a lot of beautiful love in the Tanakh. So this is a translation that's been recommended to me that I've only read some of, but I love. I have the Hebrew here, right? This translation, I found it's helpful to look at both Jewish and Christian translations because they're both working from the same original text, and it helps you get a kind of, you balance and you get a more non-biased view of what is actually being said. And there are biases and clear, in my opinion, mistranslations on both sides depending what you're reading. But I like the ESV because it's so careful. It's more of a translation and less of a transliteration. And my understanding is that the JPS also tries to be the same way. So it's the it's also called the Jerusalem Bible, according to Tanakh. But this was a much later translation, 1962. Yeah, people are prone to mistakes. So, in general, all these things will say close to the same thing, right? The main story of an Elohim who chose these people and created rules for our good to help us live in a very confusing world, right? And then knew that we couldn't live in a way that was healthy for us. We were going to harm ourselves and other people in the world around us. And therefore, to buy us back from the slavery we sell ourselves into, he's going to sell this or send us this Moshiach, right? This Messiah to not just atone for us, but begin to heal us inside so that we can keep the Torah. My rabbi says before he met Yeshua when he was growing up Hasidic Orthodox, he was so frustrated because he couldn't keep the Torah. But when he met Yeshua, and which happened as he began to study, so they have both the intellect and the emotion, not just some kind of spiritual high or whatever. Intellectually, he was led to believe through study, and he was the grandson of one of the most important rabbis in France, right? Whose entire family was wiped out in the Holocaust, right? So this is a very Jewish, educated, Orthodox, Hasidic young man. And when he studied and began to believe in Yeshua, and then from there began to have the relational, experiential relationship with talking to God through Yeshua and through HaKadosh and that whole intimacy, he found that he now was able to keep the Torah. Not just had he been healed and redeemed, right, before this God who's so radioactive, we can't approach him. It's like the sun. You don't blame the sun if you get burned up because you don't put on sunscreen, right? You put on the sunscreen. That's the sun's nature. The sun's nature is life-giving, and it's also dangerous, right? To weak little flesh beings who have not evolved to have what we need to have, right? And that's spiritually, it's the same kind of idea that we have damaged ourselves genetically, and we are not able to be in the presence of, this radioactive being, the sun. And I think it's interesting that a lot of belief systems do worship the sun, because the sun is actually a very, very good metaphor for the Kadosh of Elohim. It's very interesting. Yeshua becomes, or the Mashiach becomes like the sunscreen between us and the sun, right? So we can be in the sun and experience the vitamin D and all the good things, right? Yes, don't shake your fist in anger at the sun when you get burned. That's on you. You need to evolve better skin. And that's the idea. It's a lot of these physical concepts have spiritual parallels, because if these spiritual things are real, they should also be physical, right? There shouldn't be some kind of imaginary religious reality and then a real physical reality. Otherwise, this is all lies, and we might as well just believe in unicorns, right? If it's true, it's true, right? And if it's true for everybody. The way it manifests might be different, right? You may have different color skin than me, so the way you experience the sun may be a little bit different than the way I experience the sun, but it's the same sun, right? We may be in different latitudes, different longitudes, different seasons, but the sun is still the sun, right? Or when we look at physics, right? The speed of light is constant in all reference frames, right? We know from general and then special relativity that everything is different in different reference planes, right? What you experience when you're going 60 miles an hour on the highway and I'm standing next to the highway, right? You experience me moving backwards as you move forward. That's what you experience when you look out the window. And I experience you moving forward, right? So we can be confused similarly morally when it seems that the right thing seems to be different in different situations. But the speed of light is constant in all reference frames, right? It's interesting that Hashem is often compared to all or light. OHR is how we would spell it in English. He is the God of both light and darkness, right? There's verses where it says he clothes himself in the darkness and the storm clouds. In other words, he's in charge of both yin and yang. But the thing that we need for life, light, is what he's most often compared to. So I think when we tend to think in more physical terms like that, we start to understand these concepts like judgment and punishment and hell and all these like scary things in very different ways, where we are much more empowered as human beings. And at the same time, much more devastated to realize how much we need help and atonement. If you needed to go to the sun to escape an apocalypse on Earth, it would be horrible. You're screwed because you can't go live on the sun. And that's kind of what our situation is like spiritually. We need to go to God to be saved from what we've done to ourselves and what we've destroyed. But he is radioactive to us because we've harmed ourselves. We're not able to withstand the environment we were originally designed for, right? So we need somebody who not just protects us and brings us together, not because the sun is bad or doesn't like us, but because the sun is the sun. It has to be the way it is, right? In order for life to survive. In the sci-fi metaphor, right? You would need your ship or whatever to protect you, your special suit, which is impossible, right? The sun is very, very hot. But in this context, right, if you had to go to the sun to escape Earth, you would need that, and or you would need to change and become the kind of creature that could survive on the sun. And the Mashiach does both. The Ruach HaKodesh works inside us and makes us the kind of thing that can change. And Yeshua, or the Mashiach, protects us, gets burned instead of us, is the outside covering that gets burned up as an offering as we are saved. So I'm glad that makes sense. I have found that understanding science, and in some ways science fiction, has made me understand a lot of these concepts much more. And I'm not just making it up. If I would read more and talk less, you would see that what I'm talking about is, it's what's in there, right? It's what's in there. So that's why I say it's at the same time devastating and freeing. It's devastating because I can't live on the sun, right? And that's why Yom Kippur today is the day of fasting and grieving over the things that we've done that hurt ourselves, others, and the world, and the fact that we can't live on the sun, right? But it's also a hopeful day because we have the atonement. Whether you are someone who knows Yeshua is the Mashiach or not, you generally, if you're Reform, Conservative, or Orthodox, also believe that the Mashiach is going to be your atonement. So, I think it's very clear from Yeshaya and the historical context of the Brit Hadashah that Yeshua is the Messiah, and I think it's the most important thing in the world for you to find out if that's true or not. And he's for everybody. But there are commonalities, even with people where we don't believe the same thing. There are things that we do all believe. I'm sorry to have talked so much. Alright. So we were on verse 17, right? So verse 17. Yes, that's right. And there shall be no Adam in the Ohel Moed when he goeth to make Kapora in the HaKodesh until he come out and have made Kapora for himself and for his mice and for Kol Kichal Israel. And he shall then go out of the Mizbeach that is before Hashem, or the part of the tent of the meeting where he has sprinkled the blood, right? The altar before Hashem, and make a kapora for it, and shall take hold of the tongue of the bull and the tongue of the goat, and put it upon the carnival of the Mizbeach around about. And the issue, this is the issue I have with this translation, is there's a lot of detail that they add that isn't quite there in the Hebrew. But is based on what oral tradition and other historical data kind of indicate and how they understand it. So it may be true, but it's not what the text says. So that's as I said, that's the issue. Thank you for being with me in all this. I do feel foolish for talking so much. It's probably more of a blessing if I read instead of talking. But 19. And he shall sprinkle the dung upon it with his forefinger 7 times and make it whole and set it apart as Kodesh from the Tumah of the Bnei Yisrael. And when he had finished making Kapora for HaKodesh and the Ohel Moed and the Mizbeach, he shall bring the live goat. And Aaron shall lay both his hands upon the wash, there's also another metaphor here in which the negative things we do, our alunot and our meshayim, separate us from each other, push us away from community if they can, right? And leave us with dung and nastiness and infighting, right? That is the consequence of Pesha and Amunot. There's a lot of important symbolism here. Right? And the person that burns them shall immerse his garments and immerse his basal in mire, and afterwards they shall come into honor. And I'm pretty sure that person doesn't have to be specifically a man, actually. Which is why I think here they translated in person, because I'm pretty sure the term is Atonement. Or just sometimes there's no pronoun used and it's just one goes, right? The person goes, right? Yeah, the person that releases the goat for us. So we can check in verse 26. So to see verse 26. And we can chat too. Chatting is okay. I just feel guilty and I want to be careful about inserting too much of my opinion. This is not 26. I'm looking for a kaf like this, but then a small resh next to it. And I don't say it should be first right after this. But it is not. Why? This is weird. Why is it that? This should be verse 16. Oh no, here we go. I'm looking at the letter wrong. Here we go. Here we go. This is verse 16. So we'll look for the. This is like P and like R. And what I'm looking for is either the word ish or the word, and I don't see it. Ash. We should be able to find the word basa. But I also don't see that. On my end, we should that will kind of help. Let's identify where we are. That should be how we can find it. I may be tired, but I don't see the word either Anon or ish here. So, which at the very least indicates to me that it's just the verb. It's just saying the person who goes. Like how in Spanish sometimes there's, like if you say, I could say for example, me dijo tal cosa, right? So I could say, me dijo que tengo que dormir. He or she told me I have to sleep. That sentence does not tell you who it is. That is assumed by context instead of like he said. It's kind of like how in AAVE vernacular, sometimes you'll have the dropping of the subject pronoun as well. And just the verb for context, which is similar in Japanese too. So, in this case, it's the same thing. It's he, she, it does X, Y, Z. That's at least how I'm seeing it. Alright. So we'll continue from verse 26. Yeah, not 16. Sorry. I was mistaken. Okay. And 27. And then 28. And he parted them shall immerse his garments, and immerses the soil by him, and afterwards come into the Makane. Really, probably in those contexts. So there's a tradition of using he as the gender-neutral pronoun as well. But probably in a modern context, some of these verses here would be more correct to say they. Would it could be huge. It's like they, XYZ. And that can make reading some of these passages confusing because we have lost kind of the, so like in Spanish, for example, the plural for ellos. Ellos could be a group of guys, a group of girls, a group of whoever. The male pronoun isn't necessarily male. That's just a feature of the language. I'm not making any political statements or anything like that. There's el, where we're talking about a dude. There's ella, where we're talking about a lady. And then sometimes there's like, we leave off the subject, but we conjugate it as if it would be for el or ella, and the plural, ellos, could be male, or it could be they, a group of gender-neutral people. So that's why there were people within the Spanish-speaking community who are more Latin American and not so American or Spanish from Spain, who didn't like the Latinx movement, where we say someone is Latinx instead of Latino or Latina, because some, especially South Americans, saw that as like appropriation of their language and imperialism, where like a kind of German way of thinking, where you have an additional neuter conjugation, was being added. When in Spanish, historically, ellos has always been that inclusive they. So their language is so complicated. But anyway, when we're reading some of these passages, sometimes we have to do a little bit of digging to see who we're talking about. And a lot of times, he is they, he or she. It's further confusing because even in Greek translations of the Brit Chasha, or the apostolic writings, right? Even in Greek translations, you'll have words like, like sentences like, brothers, I'm writing to you to encourage you, right? Brothers should not be translated brothers. It's really brethren, but in English, in modern English, we've lost that, similar to Spanish, right? Old, inclusive, they group. Brethren, there was no sisterin. Brethren included men and women, right? And so the old Greek terms still have that inclusiveness, but as English evolved to modern English, we've lost thou, which was actually our intimate pronoun, as my understanding. And we've lost brethren. We've lost a lot of things that came from Middle and Old English that were actually more specific and made more sense. And as language has changed, so has our thinking, which is interesting too. So, again, I'm talking too much instead of reading. Sorry. So, 28 and 29. And this shall be Honkat Olam, or eternal decree unto you, that in the Chodesh Hashevi, on the 10th day of the Chodesh, you shall afflict your nefashot. So, then I wrote a note here that Isaiah 58 is why this word is interpreted to mean fasting, this affliction of your nefesh. And do no melacha, whether it be Islam or the girl that sojourns among you. For on that day shall the Kohen make kapocha. So this is another interesting phrase. This says on that day God will atone for you. The other translation I have says the priest will atone for you. Again, this is because the verb doesn't specify the subject. It's just the verb. For on that day, va a comprarte, or like will redeem you, will atone for you. A lot of these things make so much more sense if you speak other languages too, and not just one language. It's an unfortunate fact of our education that a lot of times in the States we don't have more than one language. For that day, your Redeemer will atone for you, to make you tahor, that you may be tahor from all your chatot for Hashem. I forgot that chatot is another word for bad things. There's avonot, be'shaim, and asal chatat. It shall be a Shabbat unto you, and you shall afflict your nefesh by Avodat Olam. And the Kohen who has been anointed, or who has been given authority to minister as a Kohen in place of his father, shall make kapocha, and shall put on the linen garments, even the Mikdei HaKodesh, and he shall make kapocha for the Mikdei HaKodesh, and he shall make kapocha for the oil moed, and for the Mizbeach, and he shall make kapocha for the Kohanim, and for Kohan Hamakai, all the people. Ukat Olam is your eternal statute, and they shall be Ukat Olam unto you, to make kapocha for the Bnei Yisrael from all their chatat once a year. And he did as Hashem commanded Moshe. I'm going to read a little more commentary that I wanted to show you, that I wanted to know something that is pretty neat also, that we sometimes read. Make sure that I can see. Over here. I know you didn't miss too much. Just me talking and handling. So, this is some analysis of what I just read. If one wishes to be involved with the inside service, or bringing another Jew closer to Judaism, by arousing him in an inner desire to return to God and help him atone for his sins, then one must first remove one's metaphorical gold garments, which are for honor and for glory, and adopt the attitude of selflessness, dedication, symbolized by the ordinary priest garments of plain white linen. That's another symbolism point for you. I only disagree with the term atone for himself. And I think, and it's neat how this translation talks about God atoning for you, because the priest is just an extension and symbol. Like, he does his part, we do our part, but the ultimate atonement comes from Hashem. And there's another analysis from another rabbi here. And you see, I realize that sometimes the focus isn't kind of right. According to the Zohar, by the way, is yeah, that makes sense. I am not surprised by that. About the notifications. Maybe you could submit a feedback report to YouTube in the top right hand corner of your screen, where you click on your face, and then all the way down in the menu that pops up, you click on send feedback. And you mention that you're not getting notifications. You can even mention my channel name. I feel hidden. And every time I try to talk to support about it, they say, no, that doesn't happen. And I'm like, but I'm not the one saying this. This is viewers saying this. I get my own notifications. You know? But I think I've somehow gotten into a bug with the algorithm. Or there's another thing where people will like revenge report you. And if you get reported enough, you kind of get like flagged as undesirable. The algorithm learns, oh, people don't like this. So there's that too. I'm gonna get out of the algorithm. I just need 10,000. I just need to get monetized on the channel. Because I think that's the one that's I'm most excited about right now. And I also need to, I have a new channel I'm starting that I think it's going to be really cool. But for the ASMR, I'm going to get out of that hole. It would be nice to get to 10,000 or to just get consistent views with my 3,000. But it is what it is. My goal is to go deeper instead of broader. If I can have more meaningful impact in fewer people's lives, I'll take it. I know that sounds very like virtue signaling or whatever, but anyway. Let me redo this. Oh, thank you. That's very sweet of you to share. It's harder to share ASMR than it is to share, like, this is how you survive in the wilderness and jump out of a burning building and survive a hostage situation. Those kind of things tend to be easier to share, I think, in my experience. It's kind of weird or difficult to share ASMR, although sharing scripture readings is kind of the exception to that. As long as people aren't weirded out by a female voice, like whispering or soft speaking, and that doesn't cause them to, I don't know, have issues, then that's shareable. I might finally be tired. I can't believe it's taken me 2 hours to read less than one chapter aloud. I talk so much, don't I? I wanted to share this with you. So the Zohar is where we get Kabbalah from. Kabbalah is the kind of mystical, magical side of Judaism. And you have to be careful, because a lot of it's not based on these things. My rabbi tends to recommend against it, but even the Zohar has commentary that is just beautifully messianic. In fact, it's in the Zohar that we hear about Elohim having not split personalities. He's not 3 different people, but having this nature where he has three different expressions of who he is, three different roles in which he operates, is, Elohim above, right? The Father, who no one can see without dying, right? The mystery that will always be beyond. And then the Moshiach, who connects us into that mystery, right? The one who can be down here with us, right? The one who is down in our zone and allows us to connect into that mystery without dying. And then Ruach HaKodesh, where we are indwelt and we take an active role. So, the Zohar even has that. In fact, there's a lot of rabbinic writing that's actually very similar to what a lot of other belief systems, including Christian belief systems teach, right? I was talking with my atheist little brother yesterday or the day before yesterday for my sister's wedding. And we were talking about the philosophy of hedonism. Ooh. Are you okay, scary spider? Are you okay? Oh gosh. Those are poisonous, aren't they? Jeez. Be careful, I guess. Kill it. I was talking with my atheist brother about the philosophy of hedonism, or selfishness, of the goodness of selfishness, right? And I was pointing out to him that actually we have really similar beliefs. It's not, we're not actually that different. And he was like, yes, we are. You believe this, and I believe that. And I was like, no, we believe the same thing. I just believe, because he believes the pursuit of happiness is the highest good, right? The freedom to pursue happiness is super important. And I'm like, yeah, we believe the same thing. And he's like, no, because you believe in glorifying God or whatever. And I'm like, it's the same thing. You can't, it's not glorifying to God if you are not, if he's actually the source of all good and he's actually worth glorifying, then you will feel happy being connected with him, even in the midst of suffering, right? It's like love. If you have to tell your wife, well, yeah, I bought you flowers. This is a metaphor from John Piper. Yeah, I bought you flowers because I should. It's Valentine's Day. It's what we're supposed to do. She won't feel glorified because you obeyed the rules. But if you say, I love being around you, I enjoy you, together we are something better than I could be apart, and you bring me happiness, even in the midst of everything that goes on, then she's glorified, right? So I shared that metaphor with him because his wife was sitting next to him, and I said, why do you love your wife? And he answered, and I said, that's what it's like. That's what it's like. So, because he was saying, human happiness can't be the highest good if glorifying God is the highest good. And I say, glorifying God is human happiness. They're not separate things. Because it does not glorify him if he doesn't actually, if he isn't actually the wellspring of all goodness, right? So, but I was pointing out, I say all this to say, I was pointing out to him that, we believe the same thing. The difference is just which way we're pointing. I'm happy to see you. I'm surprised to see you, Mr. I Don't Sleep. Haven't seen you in a long time. So, let me read you this kind of According to the Zohar, the purpose of offering incense in the holy temple is to subdue the potency of the evil inclination. And remember, this is not what's actually in the Torah passages. This is a kind of mystical interpretation that may or may not be true, but does have some goodness to it, right? This is alluded to by the fact that unlike the sacrifices, not all the ingredients of the incense were from substances fit for human consumption, and one ingredient was foul-smelling. Thus the burning of the incense represented the spiritual elevation of the very lowest of items, including the evil inclination itself. And I think that's a great metaphor. I have a note here, sublimation, which is a psychological strategy by which you can take a inclination that is unhealthy or socially unacceptable and transition it into something that would be good for you. For example, somebody who has, so there's a couple of healthy defense mechanisms described by Anna Freud. And Anna Freud's work still works, whereas Freud's work does not. He's a dummy and stupid. He only ever had 12 patients by whom he formulated his entire theory, and he never actually examined them. He wrote letters. Anyway, I won't get off on the tangent, but sublimation is like if you find that you have a lot of anger and your instinct is maybe to go punch things, right? And you realize that repressing your anger isn't going to work. You can suppress it, right? Like if you're in public and you just have the urge to just slam someone in the face, you temporarily hold that back until you can get home. And that's suppression. That's a healthy defense mechanism, right? So that you don't get in trouble. That's different from repression, where you never just address that. You push the anger down forever. And then you just, become a serial killer. But sublimation would be, you have that anger and then you paint a big, beautiful red painting full of, deep, dark blues and colors, and I don't know, maybe you paint stormy things with a lot of red. Who knows? I'm not done with this painting, but I can't figure out how to finish it because I really like this wave. Anyway, so that would be sublimation. I very much believe in using sublimation I have found that it has been the healthiest way for me to, within my faith, deal with and respond to my same-sex attraction, for example. It is sublimated into expressions of love and kindness and goodness towards women instead of focusing on a sexual attraction, right? That's an example that's like an extreme example that may offend many people, both religious and non-religious, but sublimation. So I really resonate with this piece in the Sparks of Hasidus, where they say the burning of the incense represents taking the inclinations that are not good, but then they also get offered to God. They get transformed through the fire into something beautiful. However, this begs the question on Yom Kippur. The prosecuting forces of evil are temporarily silenced. Yom 28, again, we don't know that. That's not within the scripture. But so why did the incense have to be offered as part of the special service of Yom Kippur? This question is probably not a good question. I rephrased the question as, is Teshuvah on Yom Kippur different because sacrifice is made so other days fear, but because Yeshua intercedes daily, even though his sacrifice was once. Sacrifice is once, in other words. But Hasidic thought explains that the incense of the rest of the year was comparable to Teshuvah out of fear, which has the power to wipe away the sins of the past. In other words, fear isn't always a bad emotion. The incense of Yom Kippur, however, is comparable to Teshuvah out of love, which has the power to transform national transgressions into merits. I think this is important to understand. I like this concept because it makes sense. I do love snow. It's a family. So, this concept is a very special and precious concept, because the idea isn't, oh, if I desire to be a murderer, I can pray some and then my murder is holy. That's not what we're talking about. The same things that make up our faults are the flip side of our virtues, right? Someone who has a really bad temper and gets really, cruelly angry and wants to be vengeant, the flip side of that could be injustice. They could be someone who burns for injustice and who can fight for righteousness and justice, right? So, things can be the flip of each other, right? In other words, that person maybe needs to redeem their feelings and find out the good root and find out how they can use those feelings for good, right? That's the idea with this transformative incense concept, which I think is very beautiful to think about on Yom Kippur, which is why I include their analysis in addition to talking about it. I hope this makes sense. Does this make sense? I become a little anxious when I see some of you, leave. Click away. I'm actually already super hungry. I don't know why I'm always more hungry on Yom Kippur. I'm glad it makes sense to you. Thank you. I don't know why I'm more hungry on Yom Kippur. Because other days, if I forget to eat, I'm fine. I might even forget to eat for the same amount of time that I purposely fast on Yom Kippur. But on Yom Kippur, my stomach always burns. I'm always exhausted. And it's just so draining. And I kind of let myself feel that way. I kind of, for a moment on Yom Kippur, just let go of the constant struggle for positivity and just let myself have my regular pain and negativity and realize those are also part of human experience, right? And that there are times when they're appropriate. But part of it isn't just me letting it all hang out and giving up. That's one of the things is people don't put on oils. A lot of times people don't bathe. In other words, no makeup. People don't dress up on Yom Kippur, right? You go plain and in your white linen before God, right? With nothing to hide. But for whatever reason, even if I am trying to be positive or whatever, I'm so tired and hungry on Yom Kippur. I really don't know why. So a lot of times I sleep the day away. I'll do some prayer or whatever, and then I'll be just pooped. My synagogue is having a Zoom service at 1400 EST, 10 Hawaii time today. You can join if you want. Sleep all day or eat all day. You can join if you want. You can email daniel.klutstein@gmail.com for the code. That's my rabbi's name. Klutstein is spelled Klutstein. and you can contact him. Also for our weekly synagogue streams, and then on Shabbat or Saturday. Look at my freakishly long middle finger, or my freakishly short pointer, depending on how you think about it. I hate this. I hate this, like, 2 centimeter difference. I always get distracted by it. I don't want to cut it off. I need my fingertip, but it's time to suppress these weird thoughts. Alright, so the rabbi here goes on to say, then the incense of Yom Kippur is not a negative service aimed at wiping away the evil inclination, but has the positive goal of elevating the Jewish people to serve God in a truly unlimited manner, such that even the past is transformed for the good. I think that's so beautiful, right? How our past mistakes can be the way that we learn how to help other people and protect them. Our past pains and wrongs can be the very means by which we come to love, because He who's forgiven much loves much. They can be the very things that give us humility and compassion that a perfect person will never have. For this reason, the incense was burnt specifically in the Holy of Holies, where God's absolute infinitude was revealed. Isn't that beautiful? Now this is so absolutely beautiful. And I think it's true. I think we can kind of see that from the context and from psychological reality. There's one more I'd like to share with you. Teshuvah has the power of retroactivity. For although the past is no longer under a man's prerogative, nevertheless, God, who is beyond any category of time, and therefore transcends the categories of time and limitation, has endowed Teshuvah with a special and wonderful quality, by means of which man can regain mastery over his past. Moreover, by means of this special power of Teshuvah, man is able not only to render the past neutral and ineffective, but he can even reverse it and turn it into something positive, as our sages of blessed memory expressed it. Willful wrongs become, in his case, as though they were merits. From Yom 86b. I have this notation because this is the story of Joseph, basically. When he was sold into Egypt, and his family ended up being saved because of the evil they'd done. Obviously, they had to repent in order to actually receive the blessing, but they sold him into slavery, and then he, in that situation, rose to a position of blessing and power, and the very people who had sold him ended up coming to him for help. And if he hadn't suffered that situation, he would not have had the power to make a difference for family. So it's not that their action was good, but as Joseph himself says, what you meant for evil, God has turned for good. And that's a version of what this is saying. I always, anytime you read commentary, you have to compare it to the actual Tanakh. And that's why it's good to read the whole thing, because it's commentary just on this passage of atonement. But if you know the story of Joseph and Bereshit, then you can much, much better check and see that this is found, right? So you have to know. You have to study the whole thing. The power of Teshuvah, whereby man is enabled to regain control over the past, is possible because, on one hand, it is derived from a source which transcends the category of time, as mentioned above, and on the other hand, it is drawn taught upon fully and implemented in a way that it permeates the whole being of the repentant, reaching to the very core of his divine soul, which likewise transcends time and change, and always remains loyal to godliness, because it is verily the part of godliness above. And this is excerpted from a public letter written by the Metaphysical, made during the days of Senials, by 720. My rabbi said that one of the sages used to say, a place a repenting man is sitting, no righteous man can stay. I'm not saying it's better to do wrong and then change, but I am saying that also. As Rav Shaul says, let us not say, let us do evil that grace may abound. We want to constantly do better and better good, because we don't want to sacrifice the Mashiach again, right? We don't want to recreate the suffering from which we've been delivered. But I'm closer to my spouse for the struggles we've gone through than if everything had been perfect. And that's the paradox of teshuvah, of repentance, as it's called in English. And the word, as I've said many times, actually means turning. That is why in English it can be confusing, because there's passages where it says, and God repented, but then there's other passages that say that, like, he can't change his mind and there's no changing in him, because the idea isn't that he, like, repented in our weird, over-religious sense. The idea is he turned away from judgment and towards the people, just like we turn towards him, and that is teshuvah. It is the turning together. So, that was the reading for Yom Kippur from the Torah Reading. I'm also going to read some other passages, if you don't mind. I know it's strange stuff to read before sleep, but I'm going to stop apologizing for doing what I care about. Y'all can suck it. If I want to read scripture, y'all can suck it. I feel one of my biggest challenges is how guilty and ashamed, and this is false shame, right? There's healthy guilt, I learned this in psychology, right? Healthy guilt that helps us reconnect with other people and do our teshuvah, right, as we would say. But there's also unhealthy guilt and shame, right? That's self-hurting. It's the kind of guilt and shame that led the man called Judas to kill himself, right? It doesn't lead to repentance, but to destruction. So, I am constantly ashamed of and embarrassed. I feel guilty every time I share my faith or what I believe, or why I chose to sublimate my attraction instead of living it out, right? When I talk about my faith, especially publicly, I feel like I am an offensive and evil person to my society and my generation. So that's why you see sometimes the wavering and the over-talking and the over-explaining. And it comes from experiences that I had as a teenager. And it's not wise or healthy, because I can't apologize for what I am. So I'm learning to just kind of give a middle finger to shame and guilt and being like, well, fuck you. If I want to read the Bible, I'm going to read the Bible. There are points of my life where I felt so ashamed that I felt I don't have the right to read Scripture or pray. Right? And that's not healthy shame. That is very, very unhealthy. But it's not healthy on so many levels because it's very complicated. It shows a level of a lack of self-respect, and it also shows a level of a lack of understanding and trust and confidence in God himself. Now, I'm not shaming myself for having shame, because that's ridiculous. This is why we need to talk about guilt and shame. We always try to cover things up and either be like, oh, I'm fine, everything about me is great, or we tend to go to the extreme of a lot of judgment. But the reality is, these negative emotions exist and are valuable. They exist for a reason. But we have to have the intelligence to discern when they are correct and when they are wrong. Feelings are supposed to be data, not controllers. They're not supposed to be the pilot. They're not supposed to be the captain of the ship in Star Trek. They're supposed to be engineering or data that tells you Captain, there's this chance of running into a meteor over here, or all systems are red, right? They're supposed to be data, and then the captain is supposed to make the decision. So with shame and guilt, when you feel overwhelming shame or guilt, this is why I love the Torah. It's important to have a standard by which you can compare, so you can say, you know what, this shame and guilt is misplaced. This wasn't wrong that I did. Or you can say, you know what, this wasn't good. This does hurt other people, or this does hurt me. I need to tissue. I need to turn away from this thing, right? Then we have healthy guilt that resolves. There's even a psychological technique that I pulled from when I was working for the families who had experienced recent suicide in the indigenous community, right? And in one of these books for grieving people, with some of the, most effective protocols, as I was trying to put them in a Guarani context, I found an exercise that I was like, wow, this is so appropriate to some of my American patients and health coaching clients, where the way they help you deal with guilt is you write out why you did the thing or didn't do the thing, what your reasons were and feelings at the time, and then you write a thing that you can do to amend it. And if there's nothing you can do to amend it, and you wouldn't undo the decision, you end up writing that out and realizing that, and that's quite psychologically free. So it's interesting how much of scriptural precept really, really lines up with, evidence-based psychological techniques, right? So, I'm glad it resonates with you. The idea. I'm glad of that. So, are huntsmen's not poisonous? I thought they were. Or is it just like the wolf spider? I know you guys have some crazy poisonous spiders over there where you are. I'm glad that resonated with you. I like the yes. So, sometimes there's certain comments that get to me, and they tend to be comments that trigger my gender dysphoria, or there are times when I can be made to feel shame, right, for what I'm doing, or feeling like I don't know what I'm doing, or I'm not helping people the right way, or I should do XYZ thing, right? I used to be especially sensitive to this stuff about, like, comments like, why are you making videos like this? You should be in a hospital, like, weird things, which are like, I mean, I don't know how many people have told you you've saved their lives. I don't know, right? Like, leave me alone, yo. And I'm learning to be a little more assertive. And because I've always been, there's a lot of communication where there's aggression, which has been a past communication style of mine, which is not healthy. And in an effort to try to correct that, there's a possibility of falling into passivity or passive aggression, which is the worst of all, which is especially difficult when you're like trying to communicate your need, but you don't want to offend someone, and then you end up not communicating your hurt in an open, correct way, and you end up kind of making jabs at the other person from behind the shield of passivity, so that's not good. It's difficult to be a little more assertive, and I've found that actually, if I'm just very bold, I can be much less angry. So, anyway, I'm trying to have the fuck you, I'm going to read the Bible if I want kind of attitude. And maybe this is why you don't get notifications about me on YouTube. I'm not going to conspiracy theorize. But they don't like certain words. Alright. So traditionally, Psalm 27, or Tehillim 27, is recited here until Shemini Atzalet. So we'll read that. And we're also going to read a couple of verses from Numbers, or Bamidbar 29, 7-11. So we'll open this back up. This is definitely, so we have to go back to, way back, Bamidbar, here we go, and it should be 29, I have read Bamidbar recently, there's notes all through this. Some of the things I say are just incorrect. Alright. Don't hurt my friend. Oh. Yeah. On the 10th day of the 7th month, you will have a holy celebration. Or, if we want to say this with a little more heat, right? We go Bamidbar 27. My OJB, you can download the OJB, by the way, in BibleGateway.com. They have it, but if you Google OJB PDF, you can also get it. And if all else fails, you can ask me to email you the PDF. I have the PDF, and I've actually communicated with the translator because I really want to get a translation option in Spanish. Okay, 7, verse 7. You shall have on the 10th day of the 7th month, Yom Kippur, a miklah kodesh, a holy congregation, and you shall afflict your nefashot, your life force, your spirit. And I don't say soul because animals, well, I don't want to get into this long discussion of sentience. I'm writing a book about it. You can read that book. But nefashot is only used of animals. So it's not the thing that differentiates us from animals. There's a passage in Yom that says, and you, meaning God, dog, man, different than the animals. In other words, we're not inherently above. We have been dawned differently. And in the Hebrew, it's more like that. There's less division, like there is in Greek and Roman thought. So, the kind of floaty spirit idea of the soul, in my understanding, seems to be more a Greek idea. I'm not saying souls don't exist, but I'm saying this term, whatever this term nefashot is, or nefesh in the singular, in Scripture it's also used of the animals. So it's kind of like your life force, your spirit, right? So, you shall afflict your nefashot. You shall not do any melacha with therein. But you shall offer an olah unto Hashem for a royach, hanichoch, pleasant aroma. 1 young bull, 1 ram, and shiva kevasim of the first year. They shall be unto you demimim. And their mincha shall be a fine flour mixed with shemen, 3/10 ephah for the bull, 2/10 ephah for the ram, or the ayim, and 1/10 for each keves of the Shabbat. Kevesim. 1 male of the goats for chatat, in addition to the chatat and the olat hatamid, and its mincha and their nesek. And that is the other place where you can see Yom Kippur being commanded. I think we'll read a little bit of Tehillim 27, which is recited this time. I'll find it here. It should be before this. One thing that is confusing is I memorized the Greco-Christian order for the Tanakh, which is pretty much the same, but there are some things that are different. And one of the things that is different, here we go, is that Psalms is in a different place, Chronicles is in a different place, things are in different places, and then I can't find them. It should be here, it should be near Mishneh. Here it is. 27. I think it's good. You don't have to actively participate. You can just rest. You're doing so much already. Your life is active participation. And that's important. Your life needs to be active participation. But sometimes it's nice to just lay back and receive and be okay. So, and if you have to turn things off, that's good too. If you gotta go get out the shoe to fight spiders, that's okay too. It's all okay. Remember the difference between the kinds of shames. If you're not doing anything wrong, you really don't have anything to apologize for. Also, don't feel guilty for apologizing. It's okay either way. I often would feel guilty for apologizing. Isn't that just a horrible cycle? Guilt, especially guilt that's related to any kind of trauma, is a very tricky, fickle thing. There's a little song that I love that's actually kind of appropriate around this. It was originally by a metal band called Disciple a long time ago. Not a long time ago, just when I was. It's really neat. They kind of frame escaping shame and past as like a breakup kind of. So it goes like, dear pain, oh it's been a long time. Remember when you were holding me tight? I would stay awake with you all night. Dear shame, I was safe in your arms. You were there when it all fell apart. I would get so lost in your beautiful eyes. But yeah, I think it kind of sums up. It's very Yom Kippur appropriate. this is the psalm that is read at this time, or recited, really, in synagogues. It's interesting because it doesn't seem related to the topic. It is, though. It's traditionally read until Shemini Atzilut. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. We did lose a viewer, so it can't have been that nice. I'm kidding. So, this is from the JPS translation, right? 27. And we'll just read it in normal English. This is of David. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked, my enemies and my foes, came upon me to eat up my flesh. They stumbled and fell, though a host shall camp against me. My heart shall not fear. Though war should rise against me, even then I will be confident. One thing have I desired of the Lord, and that shall I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord. Notice all the very, intimate language. This is, I think, why it's used as teshuvah. Because the idea of teshuvah isn't to leave the negative, it's to turn towards the positive. Because there's something, we leave bad things behind because there's something better waiting for us. We avoid the tree of negative knowledge of good and evil so that we can eat the tree of life. The point isn't avoiding the bad tree. The point is eating the good tree, right? And we forget that with all of our religious do's and don'ts. To behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. For in the day of evil he shall hide me in his pavilion, in the covert of his tent. He shall hide me, he shall set me upon a rock. And now shall my head be lifted up above my enemies, round about. It's a little hard. Round about me. Notice that the enemies are still there. He doesn't just make the enemies disappear, right? They're still a part of his reality. But his head is lifted up above them. He is okay in the midst of them. Therefore I will offer up in his tabernacle sacrifices of joy. I will sing and I will make melody to the Lord. Hear, O Lord, when I cry with my voice. Be gracious to me and answer me. Of thee my heart has said, seek my face. That's also very interesting language. Of thee my heart has said, seek my face. It's strange because you would think the heart would say, seek my face if we talk about the heart itself. So, in other words, Elohim, becomes his heart, kind of, in this passage. It's very strange language. Thy face, O Lord, I will seek. Hide not thy face from me, put not thy servant away in anger. Thou hast been my help. Abandon me not, nor forsake me, O Lord. For my father and my mother have forsaken me, but the Lord will take me up. This makes me think of the children in Paraguay, because so many of them don't have a dad. Teach me thy way, O Lord, and lead me in an even path because of my enemies. Deliver me not over to the will of my enemies, for false witnesses are risen up against me. This is so familiar to me. And such as breathe out violence. Were it not that I believed I should see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thy heart. And wait on the Lord. Oh, I hope my medication arrives today that I am out of. Because I also don't feel good. So that's traditionally read. also the half Torah portion is from Shia 57:14 and 58:14. Shia. We have Ezekiel, Jeremiah. And generally the orders are pretty similar here, guys. Yep. I've still got it. Isaiah 57. 57. And it is 14 through 58:14. Do you guys like it better when I'm holding it up here? Or do you guys like it better when you can see it down there? How do you prefer? Please let me know. However it is, you let me know. I can't tell if... Okay. I can't tell if your face is misaligned. It doesn't seem to be. 57. Either way, you like it better up here or you like it better down there. That's what I don't know. The resolution down there. You like it? You think holding is nicer? I kind of think so too, actually, to tell you the truth. But then I can't cheat and also read the Hebrew on my screen. 57:14. And one shall say, bank up, build up. Isn't this beautiful? Listen. Prepare the way, take up the stumbling block out of the way of my people. Is that not familiar? That's what's quoted of John, actually. Prepare and make straight the name of the Lord, the way of the Lord. In other words, preparing for the coming of the Messiah. For this is the high and lofty one that inhabits eternity, whose name is holy. I dwell on high and in a holy place. Yet with him also that is of contrite and humble spirit, to revive the spirit of the humble, and to revive the heart of the contrite ones. For I will not contend forever, neither will I always be angry. But the spirit and the soul which I have made should faint before me. There's another translation that says, lest the spirit faint before me. In other words, he doesn't want us to faint and be. There's a question of how our brokenness works, basically. And you can kind of read either from this passage, actually. He's with the people who are broken, but also he doesn't want to destroy. Right? For the iniquity of his covetousness was I wrathful and smote him. I hid me and was angry. But he went on perversely in the way of his heart. I have seen his ways, and I will heal him. In other words, that evil becomes a sickness, and that God sees that anger isn't the only thing that's going to fix it. So he reaches out in love, right? I will lead him also and bestow comforts on him and on his mourners. I will create a new expression of the lips. Peace, peace, both far and near, says the Lord, and I will hear him. But the wicked are like the troubled sea, which cannot be still, and whose waters cast up fire and dirt. There will be no peace, says my God, for the wicked. Cry aloud, spare not, lift up thy voice like the shofar, and show my people their transgression, and the house of Yaakov their sins. Yet they seek me daily, and they desire to know my ways, as a nation that did righteousness, and forsake not the ordinance of their God. They ask of me judgments of justice. They desire that God should be near. So in other words, there's this religious fakeness, right? Why have we fasted, say they, and thou seest not? Why have we afflicted our soul, and thou takest no knowledge? Behold, in the day of your fast, you pursue your business and exact all your payments. Behold, you fast for strife and debate, and to smite with the fist of wickedness. You fast not this day to make your voice be heard on high. It is such a fast that I have chosen, a day for man to afflict his soul. Is it to bow down his head like a bulrush and to spread sackcloth and ashes under him? In other words, is the fasting and the suffering of the fast the point? Are you spending that day in nasty debate and strife? And, what is your religion? What is the action of your religion? and the day of your fast you pursue your business and exact all your payments, right? Wilt thou call this a fast and an acceptable day of the Lord? Is this not the fast that I have chosen? To loose the chains of wickedness, to undo the bands of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke. In other words, justice. Is it not to share thy bread with the hungry, that thou bring the poor that are cast out to thy house? I am going to do a video on the Superhero channel about people who take this literally and bring homeless people into their homes until they can get back on their feet. They interview them and do safety procedures, but I mean, it's incredible, right? And it shouldn't be incredible. The idea should be that this is how we are. Can you imagine if we were like this? When thou seest the naked, that thou cover him, and that thou hide not thyself from thy own flesh. In other words, the suffering person is us also. You know how sometimes you might be passing somebody who's in need, and you try to go quickly and not make eye contact, right? You're hiding from, and sometimes we try to put silver linings when somebody is suffering. We try to say, well, it's kind of like, well, my brother died, well, at least your sister didn't die, right? Like, we try to put silver linings on things because we have trouble sitting with the pain. Why do we have trouble sitting with the pain? Because people's pain does become our pain. It does connect with us. So we're hiding from our own flesh and pain that we see in other people, right? We shouldn't do that. We should be okay with pain so that we can heal other people's pain. By being willing to carry pain with someone else, the pain begins to disappear. Then shall thy light break forth like the morning, and thy house shall spring forth speedily, and thy righteousness shall go before thee. This is like pretty much identical to the ESV. The glory of the Lord shall be thy rear guard. Then thou shalt call, and the Lord shall answer. Thou shalt cry, and he shall say, Here I am. If thou take away from the midst of thee the yoke, the pointing of the finger, and speaking iniquity. In other words, he's saying these fasts, that's not what I want from religious fasts. That's not what I want from religion. The pointing of the finger, the yoke, the heavy chains, right? That's not what I want. If thou draw out thy soul to the hungry and satisfy the afflicted soul, then shall thy light rise in darkness, and thy gloom be as noonday. And the Lord shall guide thee continually and satisfy thy soul in drought, and make strong thy bones. And thou shalt be like a watered garden, and like a spring of water whose waters fail not. And they that shall be of thee shall build the old waste places. Thou shalt raise up the foundations of many generations, and thou shalt be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of past dwelling. If thou restrain thy foot because of the Sabbath from pursuing thy business on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy day of the Lord honorable, and shall honor it. In other words, he also takes so seriously resting. So seriously. And you see our society of pointing of the finger and the yoke, and where the worker doesn't have a day off, right? And we don't give that to ourselves. And then what happens? We get ill, right? We get sick. We ignore our employees, our workers, other people who are less fortunate than us. We end up ignoring a piece of ourselves, right? Because we are connected. And I feel this so much in my own life. I wish that I had kept Sabbaths through the early part of my life. I said this to someone, and then my mom was like, I don't think God is that judgmental that he would punish you for not knowing. No. That's not how it works. I'm not saying God is punishing me. I'm saying the Sabbath was given to me for my health. I should have been resting. Just like, I don't know, would you call it God punishing you if you don't sleep all night and then you are tired the next day? Is that God punishing you? And maybe it's the natural result of not sleeping, right? Not resting. The curses, the lack of blessings that come upon us as natural consequences in a world that was originally made to fit happy and healthy people, right? And then, it broke with the fall, and we've continued to break it. The rules, though, these, I don't even like calling them rules. They're like laws, they're precepts, like laws of physics. Is it punishment when you jump off a cliff and gravity takes you down? Gravity has to work that way because that's how we keep the atmosphere in. That's how you allow trees to grow. Like, gravity is important to the way we survive. So, whose fault is it if you suffer the consequences of not listening to the laws of physics? It's the same kind of thing. So yes, God is in it because he made physics. But maybe it's more, am I punishing myself? I'm not saying that God doesn't inflict things. But you can see how it's a little different than we tend to think of it. He doesn't want the pointing of the finger. He doesn't want the yoke. And that's how we think of it. He wants us to rest on the Sabbath. He wants us to take a day where we don't work. That's what he wants. I mean, this is so different than what we think of when we think of religion. It's... Call the Sabbath a delight, the holy day of the Lord honorable. Thou shalt honor it, not doing thy own ways, not pursuing thy own business, nor speaking of vain matters. How much time do we waste speaking of vain matters? Celebrity gossip and things like that. Then shalt thou delight thyself in the Lord, and I will cause thee to ride upon the high places of the earth, and feed thee with the heritage of Yaakov thy father, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken it. Some of these passages require a lot less explanation than the Torah passages at the beginning. They're just very, very self-explanatory. There are a couple other psalms I kind of want to read that are kind of applicable. I also kind of want to read there is a portion that I wanted to read for this week. There's a lot of things I wanted to read this week that I haven't. I think I forgot to put in the 5 apostolic that I was putting in. Yohanan 1 through 5 I had wanted to put in and read it this time. But I think yeah, because we shouldn't be in Belashit yet. It's a little strange. I guess it's because I'm associating John with Shemini Torah, which comes soon. So the way the holidays work is we have Rosh Hashanah, which was last week, which is like heralding. It's really neat how it fits with the life. I haven't done a good job like syncing up my Brit Chadashah readings with this, but there's the coming of the Messiah, there's the shofar blowing, and then there's Yom Kippur, there's the Atonement, there's the death, and then there's Sukkot, which is kind of like the period we're living in now, where we dwell in tents, we are pilgrims in this world, but we are provided for by him. It also syncs with the Egypt story, right? You have the blowing, you have the announcement, you have Moshe coming and telling Pharaoh, you're going to let my people go. And then you have Passover, you have the suffering and the death of the firstborn, and then you have the escape from Egypt, and then you have Sukkot, the tabernacling in the wilderness. It's interesting how these things follow this kind of pattern. Yom Kippur isn't Passover, but it reflects the spring festival of Passover, right? So it's neat. So really probably this week, and I tried to sync it more with Passover so that I read about the end of the Messiah's earthly life on closer to Passover and start reading here, because then after Sukkot you have Shemini Torah, or the giving of the Torah, and technically that also fits with the Messiah coming, because the Messiah is supposed to be the living incarnation of the Torah. So It's hard to sync it up perfectly because you could, there's a lot of things you could put in a lot of different ways. All these festivals are so interconnected. I think we'll read Yohanan 1-5. So now we will break out the other big manuscript. This one, the Aramaic Britasha, or Katsuba. Pedasha. I wonder why. I don't really know what that means. Pedasha. This is a ka. This is a t. This is a ba. So ketuba, kotuba, katuba, kituba. I'm not sure because I don't have the vowels. And then this is pe. This is da. This is sha. Pedasha. So I'm not sure exactly what that means, actually. Aramaic, when I realized that Aramaic was different than Hebrew, I was quite discouraged. And it was like, I don't want to learn a third language for scripture reading. But that's okay. I have my whole life to learn these things, so a little bit at a time. And whatever I can learn is a blessing to me. It doesn't all have to be it doesn't have to be what I think it is. So I'll just read the first 5 chapters here. Now the Aramaic is a little bit different. One thing I like about this, so this translator is he has a lot of opinions, but he keeps his opinions below the text, which I appreciate. His opinions are very strong. He feels that both Rabbinic Judaism and Christianity are like evil idolatry things. And he feels like he speaks very strongly, and I understand what he means. He's talking about like hypocrisy within these systems. He's not saying that everybody who claims to believe either of the belief systems is like evil or going to hell or whatever. He's just making he very strongly is against a lot of the like man-made traditions, the yokes, right? I don't agree with everything he says, but he doesn't put his opinions in the text, which is beautiful. So, in the beginning was the milta, or in Aramaic, Bereshit Aitohi Huamilta, which breaks the most basic rule of Aramaic grammar by combining a feminine noun, milta, with 2 masculine verbs for to be, Aitohi and Hua. This is unheard of in Aramaic literature other than right here in this passage and in 1 John. This shows that Yahweh has male and female images or spirits, even though Yahweh remains a he. It may also be a midrash on Yeshaya 11:1-2. I don't want to confuse anyone with that. If male and female both come from God, he has to be the perfect source of both of those things, right? Even if he then identifies as or says he, right? In other words, he has to have the female attribute. Otherwise, females can't exist. And because no one person can fully demonstrate the attributes of God is why there are many people. Otherwise, he could have just made one man or woman to be his best friend, and that was all he needed. But he needed all of us because all of us reflect back to him pieces of him that he can enjoy in us. He can enjoy us. He is beautifully self-indulgent. He enjoys having pleasure with his people and enjoying himself with his people. He has a good time. It's not very different from my atheist brother's belief in the pursuit of happiness, right? It's just my atheist brother does not think God is allowed to pursue happiness in many ways. But it's really the same concept, right? So he makes us to reflect him well. So he makes male and female in order to demonstrate these different yin and yang sides of his nature. in order to demonstrate also the relationship that he wants to have with us. The unity and the creative expression and the exposedness, the nakedness, even the biological act of intimacy itself is a metaphor for the rhythm of giving and receiving from God, right? And the rhythm of being exposed and vulnerable and known and safe, oxytocin itself is a metaphor, right? So that's why philosophers will sometimes talk about things like this. So it may also be a midrash on Yeshaya 11:1-2. To understand that term midrash, you have to understand what midrash is. Midrash is a commentary on Torah or Tanakh. That's what midrash is. So when we talk about the 4-layer rabbinic interpretation that I've talked about many times, you have, the P layer, which is the most obvious literal meaning of the text. You have the R layer, which is the allegorical, metaphorical meaning. Then you have 3, the midrashic meaning, and that's where you look into like the historic stuff, the commentaries, the context. And then the 4th is the Kabbalistic or mystical meaning. It's this special kind of high, almost magical sense that you receive. Each layer cannot contradict the layers above it. You cannot come up with a mystical thing and say, well, God told me, that the world was going to end tomorrow on such and such date, if that directly contradicts what it says in, the literal scripture, right? So you go in order, and that helps you to have a logical and emotional interpretation. And I think that would be such a lovely thing applied to many, many concepts and texts, right? So that's what they mean by midrash. So they're saying that this passage written by Yochanan, who was a 1st century Jew, may reflect, it may be a commentary on Yeshaya 11:1-2, which describes the Spirit of Yahweh descending on Mashiach using both masculine and feminine suffixes. This is not something easily translated, let alone when it occurs within the first 4 words. Miltha has no direct English equivalent. It can mean word, manifestation, instance, or substance, among other things. And I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you caught me. In this context, it may be best left untranslated. And I like that he would rather leave words untranslated than put meaning into them. And so he explains his thinking here. So I like how honest this writer is. In the beginning was the Miltha. Bereshit Torah Miltha. And that Miltha was with Elohim. And Elohim was with that Miltha. This was with Elohim in the beginning. Everything existed through his hands, and without him not even one thing existed of the things which have existed. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And that light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overtake it. There was a man who was sent from Elohim, whose name was Yochanan. Not the Yochanan who wrote this book, a different one. This man came for a witness that he might testify concerning the light, that all might believe through his hand. And this is directly, what's so neat about this, is this Yochanan passage referencing that Yochanan in the 1st century, directly in other books like Matthew or Matthew, they directly quote the passage we just read from thousands of years before in Yeshaya, right? In other words, prepare ye a way for the Lord, kind of make the path straight for Israel. That is this. There's references to these things. Years in the future, right? This man came for a witness that he might testify concerning the light, that all might believe through his hand. He was not the light, rather, that he might bear witness concerning the light. For the light was of truth, which shines on all who come into the world. He was in the world, and the world existed by his hand. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. Now we're talking about the Messiah, right? Which fulfills the prophecies in Tehillim 69:9, Yeshaya 53:3, and Daniel 9:24-26. This is why, these kind of things are why I believe this is the Messiah, right? Because it's the Tanakh that tells us. It's not because of some replacement or something like that, or something non-Jewish. This is the stuff, right? And he's for the whole world. for people like me, and for people like my rabbi, like for Klutsteins and Wisugis and Hilltofts and all kinds of different people, and Finellis. God is the God of everyone. The truth is the truth. It is. And that is why we share these things. Those of us who are kind of radical and offensive. But those who did receive him, he gave to them authority that they might be the sons of Elohim, those who believed in his name, those who neither by blood, nor by the will of the flesh, nor by the will of a man, rather were begotten by Elohim. And the Miltha became flesh and dwelt among us. In Hebrew, this would be the Devar, or the Torah. Became flesh and dwelt among us, and we saw his glory. The glory is the only begotten, who is from the Father, who is full of grace and truth. Yochanan witnessed concerning him and cried out, "This is whom I said would come after me, and yet be before me, because he was earlier than me." And from his fullness we've all received grace on account of grace, because Torah was given through Moshe, but truth and grace through Yeshua, who is the Mashiach. It's also much more direct, the translations from Aramaic, than the translations that come from Greek. And this is the perfect place for you to be. I'm going to post this soonish, and certainly a replay will be available, and you are welcome to listen through, because you are in the right place. Meditation is important, and it's so important to have someone who loves you that you can connect with and meditate on. And we don't want to have a religion. We don't want to have something that we make up in our head. We want to have reality and truth. So we have to find out what actually lines up with truth. Right? Because once you find truth and you find Elohim, that's what changes everything. And then everything else follows. Meditation, psychological things, understanding health precepts. If God is real, then he is real. He's not like going to be separate from scientific realities, right? He's going to be real. Because he is real, and because he wants to protect us, sometimes there will be laws like laws of physics given, like I was talking about earlier, right? Like, don't jump off this cliff, you will fall down, because I need gravity to make the world work, right? Like I mentioned earlier. One of those is, don't go to Acharim Elohim, right? Don't chase after all these other little gods that can't satisfy you and that will hurt you. So that's why Jewish people have always been very, very careful about idolatry, and why a lot of Jewish people who are rabbinic and are afraid of essentially Jesus theology, because they're afraid of making a man to be God, right? Because they don't want to disobey this idolatry rule. That's just an example, right? So like when I was in Japan with my uncle, and he believed me to be, because I'm part Japanese, he believed me to be a religious person, and we passed a Buddhist temple, and he said, "Oh, do you need to go in there and pray?" But I can't pray to, I told him, well, I can't pray to I can't pray to those. I have to pray to my Elohim. And he was like, "Oh, we can just kind of pray to whatever." Yes. But he wants to protect me from things that will hurt me. And you're right, it's complicated stuff. It can hurt my head too. But that's why we repeat it. That's why we be gentle. You know all that really matters? Beyond all this complex, like, historical stuff, beyond these complex philosophical divisions and these questions of Reform, Conservative, Orthodox Judaism, and where does, like, Christianity fit in, between all these kind of things, what's most important is that you know that it's you know the Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Echavta et Adonai Eloheinu, B'kol levacha, B'kol moedecha, B'kol nafshecha, and Echavta et Lereaka kamocha. And that you know this, right? That the Milta, the Reshit Aitochi Milta, came to make those things possible. So the Shema that I just said, which is the most important prayer in Judaism, is in Hebrew, Hear, O Israel, Elohim, our Yahweh. He is one. He is a unity. You shall love him with all of you, the seed of your will, intellect thing, your lev, your decision making. And often it's translated as both heart and mind in English. You shall love him with all your life force, your live nefashot is plural, nefesh is singular. Nefasha is plural, but it's yours. It's a little bit, there's all kinds of grammar. You should love him with all of that. In other words, the same thing that animals have, this kind of, life spirit, right? And you shall love him with all your modeha, all your strength. So 3 elements of you, because you are triune, some ways, right? And the second command is like it, right? The second command is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. And if these things are real, if there is this God, right? A lot of us have a lot of religious pain and trauma. We've been hurt by liars. What we were reading earlier in Yeshaya, I would really encourage you to hear from Yeshaya 57, where he calls out religious people, because today's Yom Kippur, right? So today we're fasting. And he says, is this the kind of fast that I want of you, just for you to be miserable? And then on that same day, you bicker and you fight. You go about and focus on your own business. You don't rest. You point the finger. You put heavy burdens on people. And he says, no, what I want, the kind of fast I want, is that you free the oppressed, that you help the poor, and that you take off the yokes, and that you don't point the finger, and that you rest and enjoy the Shabbat. Right? That's what he wants. So his concept is so different than our concept of essentially what we call religion, right? And if you've had a fucked up childhood and terrible things have happened to you, there was parts that we were reading earlier about using the past and redeeming the past. And today is a good day to remember that we read a passage talking about, or an interpretation talking about, incense in the old tabernacles and temples and what it might represent. But the idea is, I don't know if you remember the story of Joseph. You might, based on where you grew up. But he was sold into slavery, but because of the bad things that happened to him, he was in a special position where he was able to save many people. And that's the most difficult thing. I mean, that's what I struggle with so much, right? That's what I remember standing on the hill, looking out over Korea, and saying to God, and I've always had a very philosophical background, so I was saying to him, you better be a real Calvinist right now, because I can't believe in you, so you're going to have to just choose me, because I can't choose you anymore. I was so broken down mentally, my brain wasn't working, I was really ill, and I was seeing evil things. This was when I was sexual assault medical forensic examiner and a battalion surgeon, and trying to fight what I saw as wearing people down and slowly killing the morale and minds of my soldiers, right? And it was after years and years of trying to keep my head up, I couldn't do it anymore. And you know what he did? In that Calvinism and Arminianism are interesting debates. You can see both of them in Scripture. I think if you understand quantum physics, it becomes very clear they're both true. This is where we get into all that complicated stuff that hurts your head. Can't get really. But the simple thing is, this is kind of what we present in the indigenous communities where I work, right? I'm very bad at it, so mostly I just present kindness, because I don't speak Guarani very well still. But what you present is, like I said, the Shema. We are called to to love this God, because if he's one, if he's the unity at the center of the universe from which all things come, if he's the good thing, we want to pursue that. We want to pursue that so that we can be happy. And then the second command is like it, "V'ahavta et le'reacha kamocha," which is usually translated, love your neighbor as yourself. The question that you hear about in the Brit Chadashah, where Yeshua is asked, well, who is my neighbor? That wasn't like some kind of new thing. Pretty much all of what he said, and everything you read in Yochanan, Matthew, Marcos, and Lucas, everything in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all of it is actually commentary on the Torah, right? Because these were observant Jews. He was Jewish, right? So that's the question. It's like, well, who is my le'aka? Because le'aka is more like my fellow. It's not just literally my neighbor. Like, so who is this person that I have to love? And he tells that story. When he's telling the story of the Good Samaritan, Samaritans were the racial enemy, right? That's the point. The person you're supposed to love is the person who's on the opposite side of you. And that's still your neighbor, right? So we have those things. And then the tragedy of it is we can't keep those. And that's what Yom Kippur is about, right? That we've been given these beautiful, everything, every rule. And I don't like calling them rules. Like I said, every law that we've been given comes from love. Even the ones that sound really horrible, right? Like, as a woman who I was not attracted to men, only to women. A lot of the passages in Leviticus or Vayikra, I really struggled with them. I was like, I don't understand why God would make these harsh rules. And over time, especially as working as a sexual health doctor, and especially after seeing some of the things that happen to people, I understand very differently that how these laws like protect us from hurting ourselves and from destroying ourselves slowly, right? And how much, and we can go in detail. There's so many rules and laws that modern people can't understand or like, but even things like kosher help make us kinder to animals, right? A lot of the animals that are forbidden in the kosher rules, yes I do stream, are either very intelligent or ill. I'm glad to see. Or like they call it illnesses, right? There's reasons for these things. We just aren't always told those reasons because he wants us to be independent and learn and develop our science and develop who we are. That's why we weren't supposed to go after the knowledge of good and evil from a tree. We were supposed to ourselves learn and develop. We didn't need a shortcut. We were enough as we are with God, right? Why not go to him instead? If he's the source of all good, why go to a tree? Why not go to him? And he gave us the tree of life. But we wanted to take the shortcut because we weren't confident enough in our relationship. And so what happens when we see when we eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil? We realize that we're naked. We realize shame. We realize negativity. And not in a healthy way. We don't realize, oh, these are things I can improve. We realize our potential for evil. And we realize how bare we are. And we then become negative on ourselves. Right? That's what happens. It's not like, oh, Chava is this brave woman seeking knowledge. Like, no, if you want knowledge, you don't get it from a tree. He doesn't just drop it on our heads like that. So that's the most important thing, right? You love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. You can't do it. So it's very simple. So because of the pain that's embedded in our genome, right? We eat this poison tree and then it affects our genome forever afterwards, right? So that it's like impossible for us to do good. And then he brings us back. He heals us by paying for the bad that happened. He does the operation with his own life, his own blood, to replace the venom that's in us. Again, that's a complicated way to say it, but when I talk about it in those contexts, in the indigenous communities, I usually say that we have this venom in our genome, which makes it that we can't be near God, which is the source of all our life, good, and everything we need. So the only way it goes away is if we die. But that's not good enough for God because he wants us to live. So instead, he takes our venom into him and he dies. And that is why he had to become a person, because God can't die. If God were to die, the universe would be destroyed. So he takes our venom, and then we come to him, and we suddenly, like I told you with my rabbi, he had studied the Torah all his life as a Hasidic Orthodox person, and now he couldn't keep it, but he met the Messiah, and now he noticed he was starting to change. The venom begins to come out of us, and we begin to become what we were always meant to be. So it's 2 steps, right? It's the first step of saying, like, the teshuvah. Teshuvah is continual. It's not this, like, conversion, right? It's not just, like, some step. Like, yes, there's these concepts of mikveh, and baptism, and all these other different concepts in both Judaism and Christianity, right? But the core of Yom Kippur today is teshuvah. It's turning. So then you start turning towards him. You say, hey, yeah, I want you to take that poison out of me because I want to find out what is the source of the universe, and I want to love you and experience that. Experience somebody who can take my suffering and make it into something meaningful. In the passage we read in Tehillim, right, where David says, please, where he says, you raise my head above my enemies. The enemies don't go away. But suddenly the suffering, the pain, the struggle, even the wrong things we've done become redeemed. Redeemed means they are purchased and bought for a new thing. A new thing happens. Their status changes and it becomes for good. It's like in Romans, which I'm sure you heard in your school. All things work together for good for those who love him. Because the tragedy is if we don't do this, we die with the venom, right? Because it is infectious. The hurtful things we do, I'm sure you know, having gone through trauma, right? The hurt our parents have experienced caused them to hurt us. We then hurt the next person, and the next person, and the next person. So the venom has to stop somewhere. It can't just continue like that, right? So, either we can die with it, because it's going to go away one day. It's not going to be around forever. Or we can be healed from it and do teshuvah. And teshuvah steps are going to be a little different for each person. Each person is going to come talking to him in different ways. So I hope that simplifies some of the very complex stuff I'm saying. It's the Shema. Love him, love people. Can't do it, so he loves us instead. And then we love because he first loved us. And one way you can start doing that is just ask him. Just say to him, like, hey, I want to turn towards you. Show me how to turn towards you in a real and authentic way. Not in a fake religious way. Not in an over woo-woo, I made up it in my head, New Age way or whatever. But show me the reality of you. Help me to understand science and scripture. And then just take tiny steps. Like I said, you can download the OJB. Bible Gateway has the ESV translation as well, which is pretty easy to read. You read a little bit at a time. And the parts you don't understand or the parts that are really confusing, you can ask people about it who've been studying Hebrew and Aramaic and these things like what we're doing now, right? Because there are hard passages, like very difficult passages. I used to say I really want to have like atheist Bible study because I think sometimes atheists do a better job digging into the hardness and being honest about it than people who claim to believe it. But that's not a dig on people who claim to believe it, right? I don't think it's good to be hateful or bigoted against religious people either, right? But that's kind of where it starts. You just talk to him. And you can do it today. You can say, Yom Kippur is a great day to do it. You can say, hey, I've had a lot of pain in my life, and I don't want to be someone who causes pain. There's a beautiful little passage in Chronicles where this guy named Jabez, and this is the only thing we know about him, is that his mother named him Pain. and which is not a very nice name. And then, he cried out to God later on, and he said, "Oh Lord, my God, please bless me greatly," which seems like such a selfish thing, right? God, please bless me. Please expand my territory. Because he was during the time where they're trying to expand, establish in a new land, right? Please expand my territory. Please bless me greatly. Please put your hand upon me. So he wants the closeness, that I might pain not. And it's interesting, because that's translated different ways. It's translated not cause pain or not experience pain, but it's pain not. And it's neat that, like a lot of Japanese texts, Hebrew texts can sometimes be interpreted in two ways on purpose, right? And you can say the same thing. You can say, God, I want to be blessed by your rules. I want to learn how to keep them. But most importantly, I want your hand on me so we can be close. And so that I might pain not hurt other people, not hurt myself, and begin to heal. And part of healing is always going to be using scientific techniques, right? I'm a physician, so I believe that. But God gives you those scientific techniques, right? I always used to say, okay, if God doesn't give me a momentary, miraculous healing from what I'm doing, and if I get healing from my medicines and everything else, that's still a miracle. It's just because it's every day doesn't make it not amazing. And that's still a gift. And that's still from him, because if he's real and he made science, then, that's the gift. So it's very simple. And your journey isn't going to look like mine, because we're different people. You may read all these same stuff that I'm reading, like the Brit Hadashah here and the Tanakh, and you might come to some different conclusions. And you may not, end up reading it all and trying to study Hebrew and everything. But every little bit counts. Every tiny step counts in the right direction. And these things help. These things help. The most important thing is to be in relationship with him and live, but these things help you learn how to do that. These are like his love letter to you. So you start by that. You start by reading his love letter to you and looking through the hard and weird stuff, because he's weird, right? I had an atheist friend when I was in high school who posted something on Facebook that was I think people don't realize how weird Christianity and these kind of things. So I don't go to a Christian church. I go to a Messianic Jewish synagogue, but we worship the same God, right? There's overlap. The only times we don't worship the same God is when there's a lot of this fake religious stuff and rules that are not in Scripture, and it becomes not my God, right? But as long as, whatever you call yourself, I don't care if you call yourself rabbinic, Orthodox, Catholic, whatever, if we're talking about this guy in these ancient texts, we're talking about the same one, right? There's a lovely, so because I come from the more Jewish philosophy perspective, I had some interesting discussions with Lebanese, I don't know how to say it, Lebanese, Arab Christian back in medical school. And there were things that we disagreed on because they have a history with Israel that's negative, right? But when he talked about my God, and he talked about experiences, and it's like if someone says to you, hey, Joe with the brown hair and he's laughs a lot, that guy? And you're oh yeah, I know Joe. It's exactly like that. Once you know him, right? And you recognize when somebody says, blah, 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 and it's oh yeah, my best friend, It's really cool. It's a really special thing to share. So even though we haven't been in contact in a long time, I still feel this special connection because that guy was my brother in that moment, right? We were talking about the Arabic term, wahle, which we have to talk about sometime. Awesome. So I don't think you're oversharing. And I think you're right. I'm really glad that you found help with therapy too. And I think you're right. Maybe now is your time. maybe today is your day. Maybe now's your time to be like, hey, you know what? God, thank you for helping heal me with my therapy and stuff like that. Can you help me figure out what is real? I'm willing to dig through the dark stuff, but I want to know the truth, and I want to be your friend, and I want to follow the beautiful things that you've given me to help me live, and I want to be connected to you. I want the poison taken out of me through this amazing chemical exchange with your Messiah, right? Like, and essentially, when I write science fiction, I write metaphors that sometimes explain some of this. When we talk about suffering, I have written 4 books, like over 1 million words on suffering, because it bothers me so much, right? And as someone who's in constant physical pain, I think a lot about suffering, right? Why does God let people suffer? All my books are actually, that's what they're actually about, right? And a metaphor that I've come to use is with the way we have become, we suck energy out of the universe, right? I'm not saying that to say humans are not beautiful and wonderful creatures. We're in the image of God. But there's no denying, I mean, you can look at it with stuff like how our greed affects the environment, how our greed affects each other, right? How our nastiness, how the way we lie about God, how we affect each other, right? How we try to control each other and use beautiful things for our own evil ends, which is, I mean, that's what sexual assault is. It's using something beautiful for an evil, controlling purpose, right? And that's what we do in a lot of things. So we are sucking the energy out of the universe that was put there, right? And none of us have enough, blood to pay it back. We all die because the universe is trying to right itself. So we die and the cycles continue. But the Messiah, because he's perfect, he's never sucked energy out because he is God, right? All his energy comes from God. He can pay back all our energy. And when he does that like huge chemical reaction through humanity, because he's human, because he connects with us in our genome, if you get close to him, you can also tap into that energy, so that instead of sucking energy out of the world, you receive and give energy with God in that unity. So these are all very complex metaphors for just, talk to God, tell him you want to be in connected with his Messiah. Probably good to declare it publicly, because that is kind of like you take a stand, That's why people get baptized, right? So that you're telling yourself, it's really for you, so you can tell yourself, hey, I'm going to take my heart seriously. I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to follow these things. I'm going to find love in God, because that's for me, right? It's for me. It's a very selfish thing to pursue God. People don't realize it. And that's good. That's okay. If God didn't want you to want reward, he wouldn't say, if you do these good things will happen to you. He wouldn't say, honor your mother and father so that it may go well with you and you may live a long time. Right? Because we learn from their wisdom. We're kind to them even when sometimes they're not good to us. We establish boundaries if need be, but we honor. And as a result, we have forgiving hearts, which is healthier, and we live a long time. We learn from them, from their good things and mistakes, so we live a long time, right? If he just wanted you to be stoic and just good for goodness' sake, he wouldn't tell you good stuff will happen to you if you do good. He would say, honor your mother and father, because I told you so. Just do it, right? And sometimes there are things he does not deeply explain, because he wants us to figure it out ourselves and be big boys and girls. He wants the human race to grow and develop. That's why he doesn't just plop us down on Earth with spaceships and everything already made for us, right? We have to figure out and learn science ourselves. Although we would learn a lot faster if we were connected into him, so we weren't all doing strife and hurting each other. And, if it wasn't for all the nastiness on this planet, we would be well into another solar system by now, I'm sure, exploring and making beautiful things. But we're so busy being nasty to each other, so we have to fix that, right? So, yeah, talk talk to him, read some from him, make like a decision, right? So, and that's for you, so that you have stepped over a threshold, and then enjoy him, enjoy it, like have fun, like celebrate things like Jubilee and justice and the beautiful things, right? The whole idea is we don't just not eat from the bad tree. We pursue the tree of life. We pursue happiness. We pursue what is in the source of all good things. Does that make it simpler? I hope it does. I love these very complicated Yom Kippur things. But, you know, I think you're not wrong. You're not alone if he's with you. That's what we just read. I'm going to read that again right now, right? That's what we just read in Tehillim 27. I'm going to read it again. Probably someone else needs to hear it again too. You're probably not the only one. But you can go back and listen to the earlier part of the stream too. He says, hide not your face from me, put not your servant away in anger. You have been my help. Abandon me not, nor forsake me, O God of my salvation. For my mother and father have forsaken me, but the Lord will take me up. Teach me thy way, and lead me in an even path because of my enemies. In other words, the negative things drive us to the good things. Deliver me not over to the will of my enemies, for false witnesses are risen up against me, and as such breathe out violence. Were it not that I believed I should see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And there's different translations here, but the idea is I would have died, right? Wait on the Lord, be of good courage, he will strengthen your heart, and wait on the Lord. I have people in my health coaching program who, in addition to health stuff, have a lot of religious angst. And one of the things I talk about is like, yes, we need to dig through the hard stuff, like hell and things like death penalties and things like these, like dark, scary things, right? We do have to dig through that. But I tell this person, like, write down the verses for you that remind you of God's love for you, because that's the foundation of all this. All these other things don't make any sense without that foundation, and that's why the Shema is the most important thing in Judaism, and it's the thing that Yeshua, or Greek name Jesus, he was not Greek, he was Jewish. That's the same stuff that he said when the lawyer asked him, what's the most important law? And he cited the Shema, right? So what Christians will often call, love your neighbor as yourself, or people will call, like, the golden rule, like, is in a different passage, and it's, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And then you have Buddhism talks about, like, sometimes the negative golden rule, don't do unto others what you wouldn't have them do unto you. But, like, all the semantics don't matter. What matters is, what is love? And we don't know what love is. We think we do, and we call all kinds of things that are not love, love. We call a lot of sex love that's not love, and that spreads disease and hurts people, right? We call a lot of things love that is not love. So that is why we need these things. But I tell her, like, focus on God loving you. Write down the passages that remind you of that. This is Psalm 27, by the way. Psalm 27:10. For my father and mother have forsaken me, but the Lord will take me up. And that's why we teshuvah towards him, because he will never reject you, right? If you turn away from him, his face will turn away from you. But he will always still be trying to hunt you down and get you back, even if for a time, in order to protect you from the consequences, there is this, like, coldness and quietness to bring you back. But he's actually always still seeking. And that's why the Tanakh is so important, because you read in the prophets, you read of him, there are moments where, like, you see God's, like, emotion, which is something you don't think about, where he says, there's a passage where he's, like, the people are, like, going into, like, human sacrifice and oppression and nasty stuff, and he's like, I gotta, like, send an army to conquer you guys, because someone else has to, like, straighten you out, because you guys are awful, right? But then he's like in the very next verse, he's like, but I can't, how can I abandon you? I can't abandon you. It's, I think it's something like Hosea, Micah, Joel. It's one of those in the 12 minor prophets scroll. He's like, I can't abandon you, right? And so it's like, yes, I will send this army to put a stop to this stuff, but I'm going to be here to take you back, right? And it doesn't get better than that.